Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crimes of Our Times Live. I am filmmaker and author John Borowski. You may have seen my works on screen, such as H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer, or in book format, such as John Wayne Gacy, Hunting a Predator. Today on my show is William Harder. Well, welcome for being on the show, William. Thank you for being here. Co-host and owner of Murder Auction.
Thank you for having me, bud.
You know, we just saw you a day or two ago on Dr. Oz, and we'll get to that in a second. But,
I was heavier back then. Right before the pandemic hit, I said to myself, you're not going to sit around and just get fat. So I actually went on a diet as soon as quarantine went in. So I've lost about 30 pounds since like almost to the date of that taping. So
I was going to say that was pretty quick weight loss. Was that like the 24-hour?
No, it was. I cut out a lot of the unhealthy, vegetarian, vegan things I was eating, and just, it's amazing. People think vegetarian means healthy. It does not. So I made some serious changes in the diet plan.
You live and learn, And if some are familiar, Will was in Serial Killer Culture TV season 2, and this is interesting because Will, you get a lot of you get hate, I get hate sometimes, but that's what goes with this business. I just wanted to read what somebody left for a review for Serial Killer Culture TV. William Harder, Murder Auction is beyond gross. I've been fascinated by serial killers, and they just go on, brags about being friends, with these killers, I'm sure you get this all the time, but what people don't know is that's serial killer culture.
It is. And you can, and if you're happy with just being into crime and, maybe reading a book or watching Mindhunter and you think that makes you a true crime enthusiast, yeah, man, that's good for you, but that's not good for me. I wouldn't be happy with that. So yeah, I've taken it one step further. And as far as, bragging, if somebody asks me, you asked me to come on and I'll answer the questions that I'm asked, but I don't, it's not, it just is. It's what I do. Right. And yeah, some of it's some people think it's exciting or neat, and it's not every day. So maybe I do mention it when I'm asked, but it's not like I did this before anybody knew who I was, before anybody cared to ask me any questions, because I enjoyed it. And to all my true crime critics, yeah, man, eat a dick.
Yeah, that's what I say. When certain people shine, and a friend of mine, brought this up to me recently too, you shine, which means that there's something about you and what you do that people are envious of and they get jealous of because you're doing what you love. And then they're like, well, why am I busting my ass working at McDonald's? And this guy, well, talk about that. This is America, right? We can buy and sell whatever we want because, Andy Kahan was on that show with you on Dr. Oz. And, he said, oh, well, it's not going to be long before you're not going to be able to sell this stuff. Talk to us about that and the rights we have as Americans.
Well, and that's just the thing. You can't tell me I can't sell my shoes. If I want to sell my shoes, I can sell them. If I want to sell a letter written by John Wayne Gacy, who the hell is he or anybody else to tell me I can't? I get it. Some people don't like this, but I don't wear leather. That's me. Do I get to tell people they can't sell leather now? No, I don't like fur. But I don't get to tell people they can't sell their fur coats just because you don't like something. And that's what America's all about. And, if Andy Kahn gets his wish and they make it a crime for me to sell and I get arrested and I go to prison, I hate to break it to everybody, but the next thing to go will be porn, like what happened with, Larry Flint.
Yep.
But they'll bring all that back up. Then, unpopular sexual orientations or unpopular religions. So they'll be locking up, the gays, the transgenders, the Muslims, anybody who doesn't fit to their criteria. And that's really the direction he's wanted to go. And the guy, and I mean this in the nicest way, but Andy Kahn hates America. He just does. He's not worried about, he says, I believe in capitalism, but the buck stop. No, the buck doesn't stop anywhere. Don't like it. Don't buy it, man. And I don't understand. I understand where he's coming from. It's his job. It's what he gets paid to do. So, you could probably pay me what Andy Kahn gets paid, and I'd go around saying, well, murder really is terrible. It should be illegal. But it's because I'm getting paid to say it. And I get it. in a lot of this, but I mean, I think that's a very dangerous, very slippery slope. And I think once it gets started, it'd be like, I mean, it would spiral out of control, and Andy'd be sitting back like, yeah, I'm going to be remembered as the guy who ruined America. And I think he knows deep down that you're not going to stop capitalism. You're not going to stop free enterprise. You're not going to take away my right to sell my personal property. You want to stop inmates from sending items out and take more of their rights away? Knock yourself out, man. Inmates already have lost their civil rights, and their mail is already, you know, if some law passes that an inmate can't send out items that are supposed to be, you know, for commerce, as he puts it, all it's going to take is for one inmate to make the sergeant mad. He's going to write a letter to his daughter or to his wife, and they're just going to take that and say, yeah, this is going to be sold, and throw it away. Or he'll make a card and they'll just seize it. And because if anybody's ever been incarcerated, they'll know that the laws and regulations set up in prisons are abused constantly by the staff. So again, I think that's a real dangerous path to go down. And unfortunately, even if he did pass some sort of law banning inmates from sending out items, it's not going to stop John Wayne Gacy letters. It's not going to stop Charles Manson or Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy or anybody who's truly collectible. I mean, he could point out examples. Well, this Gacy painting sold. Yeah, it did. And Gacy didn't make a dime. I promise you, if I sell a Gacy painting today, he's not going to get one red cent. And that's, you know, but I am, because I bought it years ago, not from Gacy, mind you. And if I want to sell it now, that's what I get to do. So yeah, it's frustrating. I understand his position, and it's just one we happen to disagree on. And I think the Constitution disagrees with it as well. And I think most Americans would if they really thought about it.
You know, I wonder if he's ever confiscated stuff, because, you know, me and some other of, you know, my true crime friends were like, he probably has a whole basement full of the stuff himself, right? And then in the end, he's going to be a millionaire. He's selling it, you know, but probably not. But, you know, I mean, he has this service kind of to do, right? To say, oh, these things are bad. But, you know, in the end, you know, he's probably in the green room. He's probably like, hey, what's up? You know, it's like, you know, he's not out against you personally, right? It's just, you know, in the end, it is ridiculous. But, you know, he's got to be that face of the fight for this murderabilia, you know.
And some of the things Andy's against, they do make sense. I mean, like the grave dirt, I can see how that would be offensive, right. And how, you know, I thought about, you know, what if, you know, if I had a daughter and she was raped and murdered, and then I found out some sorry son of a bitch went to her grave and scooped up some dirt and tried to sell it. I mean, that's just, and I agreed, you know, once I really sat down and thought about it, that's kind of, I wouldn't really like that. So I made a rule about it. But before, you know, before takes and in between takes, Andy and I, you know, we're very cordial. We've had dinner before. I took him out for his birthday one year. He's not a bad guy, and we agree on a lot of the issues, but there's a few fundamental things we just don't. And what kind of debate would be? It wouldn't be any fun if it was just me. There's got to be somebody, no matter how irrational or how un-American it is. Somebody has to take up the polar opposite, even though I don't think he makes good points. But I mean, I've always enjoyed debating Andy, and I don't think what he wants is going to ever come to fruition.
Right. You know, and you run Murder Auction, but, you know, you also talk to, you visit, you write to, you know, prisoners, serial killers. And, you know, weren't there some incidents where you helped either victims or the prisoners? I mean, you're doing some services, not just for these people that are, ooh, we want to buy this stuff from Murder Auction. It goes deeper than that. Am I right?
There is a lot more to it. And I, you know, not wanting to give up, you know, names of specific people, because I didn't really ask anybody if I could talk about it. But yeah, there is a degree of that sort of. I've had people ask me about the person who killed their loved one and things like that. People seem to forget that there's only so many serial killers, and I would say a bulk of the people that I've visited in prison were convicted of a single solitary murder that happened on one day, and that was it. It's not, you know, there's only so many, you know, Charles Mansons and Richard Ramirez's out there. So a lot of the inmates that I visit and correspond with are just people who made a very poor decision on one day, and they've been incarcerated for that decision. It's you know, they're not all serial killers. I always enjoyed writing and corresponding. Even, you know, before I even knew what murder was, I was, you know, writing letters. And as I got older, it just kind of went in this direction. but yeah, there's a lot more to it than just. I mean, I didn't write a letter to Charles Manson and say, "Hey, bud, can I get some string artwork?" That's not what I said at all.
Right.
I ended up getting a bunch. My tactic was much better than the person who writes that letter. But yeah, no, they you know it. And if it shifts to where, hey, I do artwork, I don't mind doing some art for you. It's like, great. You know, hey, can you buy me some art supply? Sure. You know, it's I feel really good after I leave a prison, especially when I visit a guy who has, or a gal who has no notoriety, has no family support, and just kind of brightening up their day a little bit. I mean, again, if you haven't been incarcerated, you don't know how much it sucks. And I'm not saying they don't need to be incarcerated. I'm not sitting here waving a flag, let out the death row inmates. No, man, I'm not saying that. But they are people. And when you hear their stories and see where they came from, it's kind of like, oh, no wonder,
right?
You know, they turned out that way. And there's a degree of infamy. And then I have this feeling of how fortunate I was not to be raped over and over by my father, or you know, beat repeatedly by my mother, or you know, any number of things that's happened to these people who end up taking a life or a series of lives. It really, you know, makes me feel, you know, fortunate and blessed, and a part of me feels like I'm giving back a little for the good life that I've had, because my life's been very good. I've very few complaints at this day, at this stage of the game anyway.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, that's the thing, you know, it's I always say that, you know, once serial killers or criminals apprehended, you know, once they go through the prison, you know, once the doors slam shut, all of a sudden they're not, you know, growing fangs and, you know, horns and, you know, green skin. They are still human beings. And I feel it's our job as a society to figure out why they do these things, you know, and there are people that are inquisitive. And then there, you know, that's why we have forensic psychologists and all these people, you know, because I agree with you, though, they're still human beings, and we can't just lock them in a cage or in a basement or in a dark room, you know, like we did with Jesse Pomeroy or, you know, Robert Stroud or some of these other people. I mean, at least Robert Stroud had some birds, you know, if they're in there, you know, and it's been shown, like in Panzram's case, that, okay, these prisoners are in there, you know, the job isn't to abuse them and make them worse. So if and when they do get out, they're even more angrier, you know. And Eric mentioned here, he never understood collecting nail clippings, but he wants to know if you have Gacy hair samples, and he bought a Gacy painting off of Murder Auction. So that's pretty cool.
Excuse me. I don't get nail clippings either. You know, people collect them, and I think it's just, yeah, man, I don't. No. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have a whole collection of nail clippings, but I think that's a creepy thing to people who actively collect that stuff. Here I am, you creepy bastards with your damn nail clippings. The hell's wrong with you? Why don't you collect some photos engraved dirt like a decent person? Gacy hair, no. He was a crime, and you know, if there are Gacy hair samples, I do have some cool Gacy items, and I have one that I'll pop out later. Yeah, so no Gacy hair, and I agree, the fingernails are clipping.
Well,
are strange.
I know where Gacy. I know where Gacy's blood is. I know there's at least one vial of Gacy's blood, and I know where it's at.
Well, they need to get a hold of me.
You know, I need a mansion too. You know, we could buy our own like murder mansion.
All of us will be happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, you know, it's always interesting, you know, but you had, I think, some of Manson's hair, you know, and you collect and sell pretty much.
In 2011, he shaved his whole head, and the hair magically left the prison and came actually straight to my door.
You know, and I think Eric was asking, you know, you've met Manson, but other than, he said Manson was the most infamous prisoner you may have met, but, you know, who was your next favorite? Like, you know, someone who you'd actually look forward to hearing from or going to visit?
Gosh. Well, the next one in the line of notoriety would probably be Richard Ramirez, who was my first, who was my first visit ever in a prison. I mean, I saw Bittaker and Norris, Charles Ng, Anthony Shore, Tommy Lynn Sells, Anthony Sowell, Michael Allig. Michael Allig was a really fun visit. I mean, because again, he wasn't a serial killer. He was the king of the club kids, you know, the party monster. And man, he just the visit was like you know, in the confines of what he could do in the visiting room, which was not much. But I mean, I remember we were trying to make some food and he picked up all the condiments and stuck them in his mouth and held them there for probably, you know, 30 seconds and spit them out. Like just all the little, I was like, oh my God, man, that's, and he goes, what, you can't sell that? And I'm like, yeah, man, no, that's absolutely horrific. You know, and he's trying to wipe them off. And I'm just like, gosh. But again, it was just, the stuff he was doing was just trying to make it fun and exciting. And I mean, he was high energy. But again, he's also not the guy who was, you know, raped by his parents or, you know, kept in a dungeon, like on a death row somewhere. His visits were a lot of fun. I mean, and there's been plenty of times where I've gone to visits and they have been fun. I've gone to some visits where guys would just start basically crying and spilling their heart out about, they don't know why they were so rotten. They don't know what made them hurt, you know, all the people they hurt or children. And it's just like, it's a real person. And while it looks all like fun and games in the pictures, and people have asked me, oh, that looks like so much fun. I said, well, you know, it's not always fun. I mean, I took pictures before a guy's execution, man, and it was really rough trying to get the pictures right. And, you know, you're trying to take nice pictures, but everybody just looks miserable, you know, and it's, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not always, and while those visits were some of the hardest, they were also some of the most rewarding, being able to, you know, be there for his family and things like that, because it's really, really, I can't even imagine. I kept thinking, what if this was my father? Right. What if this was my father and I was getting ready to watch him be executed? How horrible I would feel. And there's nothing, the feeling of helplessness and fear when you're going through the process of an execution is just, it weighs you down. And I remember when I could finally get away from the family, I just started crying. You know, I called my wife and I told her I never wanted her to ever see an execution ever, because man, it was fucking awful.
It's real.
There's no justice. Don't go to sleep. Whoever says that's never been to an execution, there's a reason there's straps across the chest. It's because they try to come up off the table. It's just nightmarish, man. We got a lot of growing to do in this country. Still, we're still killing people. Tell people killing people.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting. You know, we go back to 1930 when Panzram was executed. I've been talking about that lately on my shows because of the new book I have, Panzram at Leavenworth. And just imagine that here. There's never been an execution at Leavenworth at that time period. His was a first in a federal penitentiary. And imagine every day waking up these prisoners and they're hearing the scaffold and the gallows being built and nailed together. I mean, that just had to be grinding on everybody in there because they'd never experienced that, and it's like, moving forward, it's like you're saying, these executions and how, just awful they are. I mean, Eric says you need to write a book with all of your experiences. I'll publish it.
One day I've thought about it a lot and wanting to sit down and actually, I keep, telling myself, you should maybe take notes after you leave the prison and, because that's when it's the pressure. But I've always said to myself, you're doing this for fun. If you make it a job, it's going to be less fun.
Right.
But now I kind of look back, man, I probably should have written a few of those things down. Sometimes they'll come to me when I'm talking with somebody or somebody will remind me. Speaking of the psychological, back in Folsom, when the gallows was in the center of, they just put the board up so you couldn't see out, and they would, do the execution so everybody could hear it. And I get, that the execution is supposed to be the punishment, not leading up to it. There's no torture or mistreatment that's supposed to go on. And then the execution serves as a deterrent to the public. But when you're doing the psychological stuff and trying to make the existence of inmates as miserable as you possibly can, like they do in Texas, I mean, nobody, when they're going and committing a crime, thinks to themselves, well, I might get the death penalty if I do this. It's not a deterrent. Right. And then adding this, well, we're going to make it as sadistic as possible and do this. I mean, what does that say to us about our society and the fact that they've given and I think it's much higher, but in California, they estimate 4% of the death row population is innocent. Right. That's like 60 people. You're going to kill 60. How many innocent people is too many to execute people? To me, it's one. But let's say it's not, 1. 4%, man, that's 4 out of every 100. Is 1 in 10, 1 in 20? What's too many? I mean, killing one innocent person is too much for me. I mean, we kill people for killing. Right. Do everybody? We get to arrest all the people? The DA who hid the evidence, the The judge who gave the wrong, the illegal jury instructions, I mean, do those guys get arrested? They don't. In fact, they get promotions. And, it's absolutely just, the whole thing sucks.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't me trying to be softy on crime. Yeah, man, people commit crimes, need to go to prison. I'm not sitting here saying we should legalize murder or anything ridiculous like that. But I mean, there's just so many flaws in our legal system. And if you just go back and look at the history of the death penalty, and people, I mean, my favorite was like, well, black people commit more crime. I said, well, no, they get harsher sentences, so they're in prison longer.
Like Eric said.
There's also the systemic racism. It's a whole different subject. But I tell people, look, man, I don't want to get off on that tangent, man. I'll get real upset.
I'm the same way. I feel the same way. They're people.
None of that's even just, But again, it goes back to just killing people. I mean, we got rid of the death penalty in 1972 because they were killing black people with it in this country. The death penalty was used as a weapon. They think these stupid Confederate racist monuments are somehow a heritage thing. No, man, they were put up in front of courthouses in the 50s and 60s at the height of the civil rights era to let everybody know this is how we feel. And when you come to this courthouse, this is how you're going to be treated. And people know, oh, it's our heritage, blah, blah. You go to Germany, you don't find, there's no Goebbels University. There's no statue of Himmler in front of a park. And they haven't forgotten. People are so dumb, man.
But we're the weirdos. We're the weirdos. And we want to tell the truth.
Inmates. And yeah, we got, people in power saying that, well, if we erase our heritage, nobody will remember it. No, man, they remember Nazi Germany and Hitler. They have museums. It's illegal to hide that history there. It's also illegal to walk around waving it. People flying Confederate flags like they're leaving America. Why don't you get going?
But
get the fuck out of here, man, with racist.
Exactly. But let's talk about something fun. Your bobbleheads. So you have psycho killer bobbleheads.
The politics of today. I told myself I wasn't going to get, excited. When I think about it,
I'm the same way. I can't.
It ties in with the criminal injustice system. And I'm not saying that, just because you're white, you get a break. No, of course, there's plenty of people of all races that get railroaded. But, it's just one of those things that tends to focus on, and again, I don't want, we need to do some serious criminal justice reform in this country. And I'm not saying let people go, but when that was another thing I was going to mention. Most people in prison, people seem to forget this, are going to get out. They're going to come right back out into society. So we can treat them like animals, and we can call them animals, and we can spread coronavirus throughout the facilities. We can deny them medical care. We can do we can throw away letters they're trying to send to their kids. Those people are going to come out. And I guarantee sitting in a California state prison for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, it doesn't do anything good. When I was incarcerated back when I was in my 20s in California Department of Corrections, there was nothing redeeming. There was no rehabilitative effort. It was absolutely nightmarish. The way the officers treated inmates, the way inmates treated inmates.
And it's still happening because I have a friend who is into true crime. Yeah, I have a friend that's into true crime, and he gets word from the inside, and they're saying, look, these, the officers are abusing us. They're not protecting us. Look, here's a picture. They have us all huddled in a corner during Corona. So it's like, it's still happening. It's just, easier to hide.
The officers hate phones. Not because of drugs or hits or all this crap they tell people. They're worried about inmates filming brutality, period. The police on the street hate cell phones. You think they want them in prisons where they've had this wall up where they can do whatever they want to people? I mean, yeah, and these people are coming home. They're going to be released, and we wonder why there's, recidivism so high and that people, don't get jobs, and the whole system needs to be overhauled. And I don't have all the answers. I'm just saying I can see where the problems are. Maybe some of these people could sit down and try to actually figure some of it out. And the people in power
maybe, again, we're seeing, because of this, we're seeing a lot of this shift to where, I've heard of, true crime fans recently solving some cases. There's this new, Unsolved Mysteries out, so we don't know what's going to happen. I, and some of our other people that we know, we may be a part of that future because we know crime and we know what we're doing, and as far as writing books, believe me, I'm not going to mention who, but recently someone did approach me, that's involved with the prisons. And, like I said, they're interested in this stuff because they know that this stuff is going on. So,
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah.
It's very real, and the thing is, when they've had trials and an officer comes forward and the whistleblower, they get discredited and they get fired. It happened in Corcoran with the Cork grenade. A nurse and an officer said, yeah, they said they were killing people for fun, and those officers all got acquitted, and those two, the nurse and the officer.
Yeah, it's injustice, and that's what we were talking about.
The inmates were saying the inmates' testimony didn't count for shit. They didn't care what any of those guys had to say, and
somebody has to be their voice. You know, they get thrown in these cells, and someone has to, you know, be a voice for them. You know, and you know, you're doing that, and I think that's admirable. These people can't, you know, sit and stare at a floor forever. But talk about how did your bobbleheads come about? Was that your idea? Who makes them for you? How did that come about? Because I see them back there. Could you show us a couple? They're fascinating.
Yeah. So I did an interview with something at some point, and a guy up in Marin County, in San Rafael, actually, right next to San Quentin, just happened to see it, and he got this idea in his head of making bobbleheads. Well, I get this email, completely random. Hey, I saw one of your interviews. You gave me a great idea. I want to make bobbleheads. And I'm like, yeah, man, that sounds like a great idea. You know how much money that's going to cost? And he said, no, I want to do it. And I'm like, yeah, great. It's going to be expensive. Well, he said he wanted to meet, and he gave me his address, and I'm like, that's San Rafael. That's, the 8th most expensive county in the state of California, or one. It's up there. It's one of the. Tom Cruise used to live there. Anyway, I was like, yeah, I've been there before. I'm thinking, okay, hey, let's meet. So I picked the day I was going to the prison, and he pulls up in a 1-year-old Corvette and brings out all these resin samples of different killers, and I'm like, holy smokes, this guy's serious. We had coffee, talked for about 45 minutes to an hour, and a week later asked me if I wanted to come on board with him. And since I already was kind of like in the niche, of true crime and crime memorabilia, and he's like, look, do this, half the company is yours. And I'm like, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. I've got the number one seller right now is Ted Bundy. It was Hitler for the longest time, and I was just like, man, this sucks. They are, first series is a number series. This is number 2, and there's we did a Pogo, of course, which I thought would be one seller, but it's not. It's Bundy then Hitler, and we did a Manson.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I like it.
Do you want to accept it or not?
Does he do that? Does he do the dance?
Kill everybody.
That's great.
It's where my partner and I are kind of in a little bit of a debate of who to do next. He's kind of leaning more towards Jack the Ripper, and I want to do the Columbine shooters. He says, well, maybe we could do a Stalin, and I said, yeah, maybe we could do a Kemper. And he's like, whoa, there's that guy in Russia. Who's he? And I go, yeah, dude, nobody's going to buy Chikatilo. Maybe we should do the Black Dahlia. Yeah. And he goes, oh, Vic. I'm like, come on, man. And he goes, oh, you're just picking out very controversial figures. And I'm like, we did Hitler. Come on, man. We're doing serial killer bobbleheads. It has to be. I'm really trying to do the
that Columbine. Would be cool.
I think.
Like a set of 2 of them. Yeah. And Eric says, do Richard Speck. What?
The first edition is it's a numbered set. I think when we do the second edition, they're not going to be numbered because, let me tell you, numbering individual bobbleheads is a pain, and you got to keep a record of each one. It took me a minute to get down to a fairly quick science, but yet, second edition.
Cool. And are there how many total are there available now of how many actual bobbleheads? 16 total.
We did individual unit or characters, and we did 300.
And are there still some left of all of them? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've only just barely got to like probably 130 something for Bundy. Hitler's close. I do a bunch of stickers on it. I get a box, I sticker them, and then I just kind of pull them out. The last one I saw was I want to say it was like 134. I just sent out a Manson. I think it was 89. But I mean, I do like 30 at a time. So that could be the bottom of the barrel versus and then at the top it'd be closer to 130. But yeah, no, and they're selling more and more. Vase actually, we did one non-serial killer and Anton LaVey, and because I had to, and that was my big contribution to the first batch. I said, man, if you're gonna have Hitler, you got to have Anton LaVey, man. LaVey's he's got his place. I mean, Susan Atkins and him were friends. There's the story of him and Ramirez meeting, which wasn't true, but I mean, it's in both of their biographies talking about them hanging out. Of course, it's completely different accounts, which Ramirez told me neither were true. So I mean, he has his place, in this history, and then he's actually done really well the last 10 days. Like every other bobblehead order has at least a LaVey or it's just LaVey. So they've been fun. They've proven to be fun, and people do like.
Yeah, they look great, And because Eric mentioned, he said, "Do Richard Speck in panties with tits?" LOL, like that video.
That would be good. That would be good. He would match Dorothea, who he did in not Dorothea, Aileen Wuornos, who did in the dominatrix outfit.
Yeah, and you have Dorothea, and talk about that. You're related to Dorothea Puente, and you have her ashes.
Right. Back when I was, visiting with her, it became very necessary for me to be related to her. And as soon as we met, she immediately put me down as her grandson. And then as time progressed, and her final arrangements had to be made, I was the one involved with all that. So, I mean, there was, when I went to pick up the ashes, there was a death certificate, there was a, being picked up by grandson, and all of that had to be that way in order for me to do all this without any hiccups. So, legally, without there's no question. I can show you a paper from the state of California that says, I'm her grandson. But as far as being blood related, no, there isn't any blood relation. But for me, there's, my grandparents are dead. Well, on my father's side, his mother abandoned him, so he doesn't know who she is. Dorothea would have probably been a much better grandmother, as bad as she might have been, because she was, she wasn't so bad. She was very grandmotherly. And I used to, back when she was in the hospital wing of the prison, they used to just let me go back to her cell, and I'd walk in, I'd kick my shoes off, I'd prop my feet up on the bed, and she'd be sewing, and she'd have coffee. She didn't drink coffee, but she always had a jar of coffee for me to go make a cup. And I remember one time I was cooking, I got a ramen out, made a little prison spread using all prison ingredients. It was a lot of, and just, hanging out. And we had so much fun with it. It was just, and it had a real family feeling. Everybody, knew me. All the girls on the unit did, and they always would come by and say hi. And it was a sense of
that's what I mean, family
there. That, I mean, I know people don't even have that sort of relationship with their own siblings. I'm like, yeah, I mean, so she definitely was.
Family, right. That's what I mean, family.
And
not blood.
I think of her often. She sent me this package once, and in it there were some latex gloves. And she said, I wore these around all day. They're full of my sweat. If you commit a crime, turn them inside out and touch everything, and it'll clear you because my DNA will be everywhere. And I was like, yeah, probably won't work out. So
yeah.
I think they would real quick who had access to her DNA. But it was the funniest thing, man. I still have the package. I mean, she was a gangster, man. I used to always say, I'd rob a bank with you, Miss D, because she didn't tell on anybody. She's the only one that did time, only person incarcerated for her case. During our first visit, I remember when I said, she goes, don't ask me anything about my case. And I was like, I didn't plan on it. She goes, I'm the only one doing time on my case. You know why I'm the only one doing time on my case? And I said, I don't know, Miss D, why? Because I'm not a snitch. And that was just, she didn't want to out anybody, didn't want to even bring it up. And I just left it alone. She did open up eventually, but.
Wow, yeah.
I wouldn't.
So, talk about that process, because, it's your livelihood. You run murder auction, you deal with this all the time, you visit prisoners, you have the, artifacts that you purchase and sell. But, some people don't understand what that's like. I know some people will write to certain people in prisons and say, hey, send me the most goriest image you have, and then they'll sell it. people get pissed off at that. The prisoners might, talk about your process and how that works. Because, talk like you're explaining it to somebody who doesn't understand it, saying, well, I don't really get this. What do you do? How does that work?
Well, the first thing, man, is if you write a prisoner and you ask him to do a violent piece of artwork and you put it on the internet the very next day, know that there's an attorney somewhere making a screenshot of that to present at stages of appeals. Jack Trawick was his own worst enemy, writing those letters, and then all of them getting put up during the course of his appeal. And his lawyer said to one of the witnesses to his execution, who was a collector, he said, those websites like yours killed him, and really made him think. Because we people get items from people in prison, and they don't think when you put them online the impact it could have. And if you're asking for something for yourself, keep it to yourself. If you're that desperate for money, get a fucking job. Go collect cans. You're not going to make a bunch of money. If you're flat broke and you live with your mom, in some godforsaken place in the United States like Florida, sure, you can make $20. You can make $100, and if that's real money to you, great. But that's not real money. You're not going to get to write, Ted Bundy. You're not going to get to write, Charles Manson. Those things are worth a little bit of money, but you have to have those things already. You've had to already make the investment. If you want to write an inmate to make money, don't sell the item, because as soon as they find out, they're going to stop writing to you. They don't like that, especially if it's something violent or something that could cause them repercussions on their side of the fence. So yeah, if you're trying to do this to make money, just wait. They will die before you. I can assure you. And if you're somebody who's 18 and you want to write inmates, just wait. Believe me, you've got plenty of time. You'll be happy 30 years from now when you listen to William, who knows best, and you have all this stuff to sell on Murder Auction, which will still be around. So, for me, I like getting things. That's not why I write. That's not why I started this. I wanted to sit down with people and ask them, tell me how the day started. You woke up in the morning, and then at the end of the day, 5 people were dead, including a newborn infant and a 3-year-old. Take me through that day. How does a person, when you're sitting with a person who's convicted of multiple murders, like you said, they're not green. They're not salivating. They're just a person. And you're like, you can't help but wonder what makes a person do that. And then when they explain it to you, you kind of get a little insight into what they were going through in that moment and what they were thinking. And what I always like, what was said? What was the dialogue? When did they realize they were in trouble? Did they beg? Why? And what made you want to do this? Why is your recreation taking, whether it's forcible rape or just killing? I've met guys that just love to kill people. There wasn't a sexual aspect to it. They just murdered people for fun. Men, women, they didn't care who it was. They just like to kill people. And I don't understand how in today's society where you'll lose, like if I decided to go out and kill people, I lose all this. Us all goes away. They'll take it. Regardless, I'll never get to have it again. And that is a pretty big deterrent, the fact that I'll lose my freedom, and it's so frowned upon. But there's people that, regardless of knowing they'll lose everything, being hated, they're going to go out and rape and murder, and that's just what they love. And I want to know. And then, of course, you start to hear, well, when my mom was, having sex with her, when my mom was selling me for drugs, it's like, oh, yeah, that'll certainly give you a real piss poor attitude. And it'll make you hate women and things. And you'll just, you learn taking at a young age because you've been receiving for so long. And again, it's not excusing anybody who watches this thinks I'm saying it's okay to, it's not, man. It's not okay to kill people as an answer to your internal struggle. There's plenty of people who suffer abuse and never want to harm another living thing. But some people, it's not everybody. And there are people who've had seemingly normal, there was none of this extremeness that was in their childhood, yet they just, something in them made them want to kill. And I want to talk about that. I want to kind of figure some of that out, but not for a book, not to make money, but because it's my interest. It's like the guy who collects stamps. Is he obsessed with the post office? Do they do research on the post office? Or they just like collecting stamps? I like collecting crime memorabilia. and while they kind of goes hand in hand, it's a separate thing. I didn't set out to collect stuff. I knew it would come, and I did. Even when I first started writing, I knew I'd get things that I wanted to keep, but it wasn't the driving force. There's a lot more to me than just murder auction in regards to inmate welfare, prison reform. There's a lot more that I'm trying to do than just
Exactly.
make
And that's what I wanted to talk about, because, it's not, let's have William Harder on our show and let's just talk about, the gory and the weirdos and all the stuff, because it's not like that. I mean, sure, some may be like that, but, and Eric asks, do a lot refuse to talk about their crimes with you? How does that work? Do some want to talk about it, or some just want to talk about the weather and, the color of the walls, right?
Usually during a first visit, I'll ask, do you admit guilt? So if they admit guilt, I say, are you comfortable talking about your case? And I've had some inmates that are kind of worried, like, oh, he's just come for this and that's, and I try to, assure them, look, that's, we're not, once we get past this, it's not like I'm going to stop coming. But that's usually what I want to know. At this stage, I don't really ask about it so much. But when I first started visiting, like when I started visiting with Lawrence Bittaker, because I'd visited with Roy Norris for so long and had his version of events, I really wanted to start comparing notes. So I would visit with Norris one weekend, drive up to San Quentin, the following weekend, visit with Bittaker for 2 days and ask him everything I could, go back down to see Norris the following weekend, in Corcoran. And then I would start to compare their answers to each other, and I would catch, unfortunately, it was Norris who really tried to minimize his involvement, and he was minimizing it. He was, I didn't, I mean, when I would catch him in some of the half-truths, if you will, he would really try, well, no. And I'm like, no, come on, Roy, let's be honest, well, I don't remember that. And then it would go to that. Well, maybe I'm not remembering right. I go, oh, you're making it up. And I got it because Roy's family was alive. Roy wasn't adopted. Bittaker had nobody to worry about shaming. I mean, his adopted family disowned him real quick. And, well, that's just some awful seed we adopted. But Roy had a living family, and he wanted to minimize his role as quickly as possible so he didn't look like he was the person he really was. And I get that, But, I mean, back to the question, if they say they're innocent, I mean, I've had guys that just want to go on and on about how innocent they are. And I have a friend who actually, that was his whole thing, was hearing their the rationale. Oh, well, this was this, and the excuses, and oh, well, this was set up by the police. They planted the blood. And it's just like, man, it's almost like they believe it. But I mean, it's the evidence of so overwhelming. It's like, no, man, you raped and murdered all those women. I've had guys, Charles Ng, I'm innocent. I said, yeah, the video, though, is pretty bad, bud. But I didn't kill anybody in the video. I said, yeah, but the video, because he didn't kill anybody on the video. Innocent. I'm a dolphin trapped in a tuna net. No, buddy. You're a rapist and murderer of women. And of everybody. Children. You drew pictures of cooking children, making microwave jokes. Come on, man.
Okay, so
you're not innocent. Even if he didn't kill anybody, let's pretend he didn't. He partook. I go, dude, you were involved in raping these women. Yeah. There's videos of you. Come on, man. But yeah, but he'll argue nonstop. I'm innocent. That's all he wants to do.
Yeah, let's not get started with Gacy on that. Frost, a Canadian podcast, is asking, do you have the Mendez brothers basketball card? Have you seen that? That's
no,
funny.
Actually, no. I remember when I first saw it. I mean, there was a mad rush to get him, and all of a sudden, sellers on eBay who had no idea what was going on were trying to raise their prices because it became such a thing. I only have one of the Menendez brothers autographs as well, so I was kind of like, if I had both, I could make a nice little display with the card, but. No, I don't have one. I do have a lot of trading cards, though. I almost brought some out because I've got some signed ones that are cool. But
I know you've got so much great stuff.
Time.
When I filmed you and interviewed you for the Serial Killer Culture TV show, I was just in awe. You have so much amazing, the paintings, the drawings, the artifacts, and that's what I, as well as other true crime professionals, call them. We call them artifacts. These are important historical artifacts of events that happened that could be studied to learn about these crimes because they're a part of history. Everybody focuses on that word murderabilia, which was wasn't Andy Kahan, didn't he create that term. But, it's like, okay, we got to make all these guys the bad guys. When in actuality, everyone's interested in this shit. You know that. I go to conventions and I have parents with children take pictures of my pogo stand up. And then the kids are looking at all the
child molester,
pictures,
a serial child molester and murderer.
The kids are looking at all the mugshots on my table, right? And I'm like, yeah, these, did you ever hear, what stranger danger is, right? And I point to Albert Fish, and I'm like, see that kind old man? He wasn't. He would eat kids like you. So, everyone's interested in this. I don't care what race you are, gender, everyone is. And females are the number one market for it. They love it. They can't get enough of it. Yeah. They do, because they're inquisitive and they're curious. Why do these guys do that? And I think they wonder, how they could be wooed in by people like Bundy with the cast, or, how are they able? I mean, H.H. Holmes, look at all the women he had. And he was just a short guy that, doesn't even, I wouldn't sleep with him. You know what I mean? It's like, how did he get these women?
I think women read more than men do is the thing, and in traditional family structure, the woman would stay home, would raise children, and they would watch, crime. I mean, and not trying to say that women now, in modern times, everybody's working. Everybody has to. So, but yeah, I think women read a little bit more. And let's face it, Bundy was a good-looking guy, and women like good-looking men.
Yeah. And Ashley mentioned, Ashley was saying you basically live in a murder museum. Well, you do, but again, you want to be surrounded by things that comfort you. When I was a teenager, I would have family come over and they would say, I would never sleep in your bedroom. You don't have to. I sleep in it. I love it. I had bloody handprints on the wall, horror movie posters, Michael Myers masks. That's what it was for. And it's like, hey, if you don't like it, you turn around and walk back out, right? Yeah.
And that's what this is I want it to be filled with things that I find, aesthetically pleasing. I have crucifixes all over the place, all hanging up the right way. Mind you, I have a small human skull collection. I have a little bit of rock and roll, music memorabilia out around, but it's mostly crime related. And I've worked, the better part of 20 years doing this. And now that I'm getting a little bit older, I just want to kind of sit with it and look at it. And people like it, and I like it too. And if it gets me a little bit of attention, the occasional little titty selfie sent to me, and hey man, so be it. And the thing is, I'd be doing it anyway. And if other people like it and want to talk about it, great. But if nobody was calling me, if we weren't doing this, my house would still look just like this. And I would enjoy it no matter what anybody thought. I don't need validation for what I do. I've been doing this long before, crime was a trend. There was, when I was writing, don't get me wrong, there were people that wrote, and there were people who, sold and collected, but it wasn't the way it is today. It's really exploded.
It definitely has, and you're in the right spot again. You have to be around things again that, aesthetically please you, make you feel good, make you feel at home.
And what the fuck am I going to do? Worry about what, somebody I've never seen, or some victim who's had their life ruined and they're completely broken because they'll never get over the loss of a loved one. I'm supposed to tailor my personal space to their. Yeah, come on, man. This is my house.
And, and in these cases, what many people don't realize, I think last month we had Jen Weiss on the show, and her mother was murdered by Richard Cottingham. And she's created a website to reach out to these other, seeking other women who may have been murdered by Cottingham in the missing women in the New Jersey and New York area. So again, she's kind of, she found out her mother was murdered by Richard Cottingham, but now she's taking steps to maybe heal other people or other relatives of some of his other victims, or even find these other victims. Again, these are important things that we're doing. We're not sitting around saying, oh, I can't wait to get those toenails from Keith Jesperson, right?
Yeah, or when I hear about, something, I'm not, like, oh, I hope they kill more people so they're worth more. Oh, they only arrested him and he killed 5 people. That's not a good number. 5's not, not up there. 25 would have, no, nobody's doing, I'm not doing that. And people who, there's obviously a healing process. And I don't mean to sound harsh, because I mean, I've met victims who are, I call them professional victims, because they're never going to be happy. Nothing short of the death penalty for anybody convicted of any sort of crime is a travesty of justice if they're not locked up for life. And I'm just like, come on, man, that's not. And they're so angry. But I get it. I try to, I don't go to their pages or send them hate mail. I mean, you wouldn't believe I just got a couple of good ones just since I was on Dr. Oz. I thought about screenshotting him and saying, hey, this is, just got this one, because people are just, I mean, sending prank emails of death threats to people. Who the fuck does that? I mean, even serial killers don't do that.
That's what I'm saying.
Jesus,
I think, again,
I mean, work through this. And I mean, and in today's, in this day and age, people are going to be exposed to crime. People are going to be wearing shirts of people who are convicted of crimes. Even maybe, somebody that you're loosely attached to.
Yeah, it's America. It's pop culture.
Just being in America, man. And minimize suffering. I get it, and I get why they're so angry. But again, this is my house, right. and that's my website, and I'm not making you come. I'm not asking you to. And this notion that inmates
think about this. Money, you and I talked just before we came on about free. Now, yes, he may have did this, he may have done that, but think about this. Who's profiting off of him now? Netflix and that one reporter, right?
Not fucking Joe Exotic. I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't buy these from Joe Exotic. He's not making. He's sitting in federal prison, railroaded, just hoping that he'll see the light of day again.
But we we always really have to. I always go back to Scarface. You got to have the bad guy. I'm the bad guy, right? Manson was the bad guy, right? For that time. Now you and me were the bad guys because we're just trying to educate people. Somebody's always got to be the bad guy, but it's usually those people that are throwing the rocks that are doing some things themselves, right?
Andy will always be praised as the hero of the story because he's, even though he does the exact same thing, he promotes,
right.
Murderabilia websites. He promotes the industry. He brings more awareness to Murderabilia than any other human being I know. As good of a podcast as you might have, nobody is going to be the mouthpiece for Murderabilia that Andy Kahn is. And that's just the truth. And I get it. It's his job. The more people that know, the more people that can be outraged. But it also increases membership. It also makes more people want to write and buy, because people don't know you can. Yeah. I mean, anybody can write a letter. It's a stamp paper. Write it, send it, put a picture in it. Take a picture of a tree in your backyard, something that they're not going to see. And if your girl
that'll get
smiling
them,
in the photo.
And what are you doing now or in the near future? The bobbleheads, those are going very well. Do you have any other ideas, or we have people could find your stuff at murderauction.com, right? Murderauction.com.
Right. And the bobbleheads are psychokillerbobbleheads.com. You can also use serialkillerbobbleheads.com, but Psychokiller Bobbleheads was the name of the website, and that's what pops up.
Well, that's what I mean. What about Corona?
Anything,
I mean, can you not go to the prisons with Corona now? What's going on with that?
They're not going to have visiting's been closed indefinitely for the rest of the year. I mean, I would be very apprehensive because I mean, San Quentin, it's 1 in 3 inmate gets horrible numbers, and then how that happened. I mean, I don't want to go down another. It's anybody can look this up. They brought a bus full of inmates from Chino, which had the largest outbreak, and now San Quentin is just riddled with it. Staff are getting it. The inmate population's burning through it. It's just the incompetent handling of. It's real. It's a real thing, and they're not doing a good job. But no, visiting's done. Unfortunately, California doesn't have a video visit system set up yet, which is something that a lot of states are converting to. My only fear is some states just have that, or that's the easiest way to visit. There's not a lot of space in their visiting rooms, and I'm worried that'll become the only way to visit. And don't get me wrong, it will make it easier. And again, I'm not trying to make this about me, but then everybody will do it. It's going to be the reason I get to go to prisons as a fucking ugly man is because there's not a bunch of, 20-year-old girls on their computers. I'll video visit with you because, I might lose some visiting space. Because, like it or not, inmates are just human beings, and it goes both ways. I might have to start writing girls exclusively because the guys want a video chat, or video visit with
I've
girls.
Heard it. I mean, I've heard that it doesn't. Even Ashley's saying video visits suck. And I've heard that.
The only thing I like is I can walk around my house and show people stuff, and I mean, it really, especially guys have been down for just years. This is a whole nother world to them. They've never seen, and my house is definitely different. So I mean,
how do they react? I mean,
and I am revamping my stoptrusting.com website, which is my Stop Trusting Cops line. More relevant now than it has ever been, but it's always been relevant. But yeah, I'm working on that right now, and hopefully in the next day or two we'll be back online. And I'm putting slowly, a little slower than I'm doing the Stop Trusting. I'm putting Satan Central back together. So I will have 2 new websites up and running soon. But outside, I mean, as far as going anywhere or doing anything, and I've been hunkered down since I did Dr. Oz. I mean, I think I've gone to 4 people's houses. I mean, we've just here. There's no international travel. We're going to be in Belgium.
I know.
Belgium,
all my
and Germany
conventions, expos, they were all canceled.
Nope.
I know everything.
Yeah, it's done. I mean, we're and I don't blame them. If I was Europe, I'd be like, no, you stopped international travel when we had 1,100 cases.
Yeah, no,
you're crazy if you think we're going to let you guys come
I
here
agree.
now.
Where'd you get the Joe Exotic shirt? That's pretty cool.
Blame him one bit.
That's awesome.
Got it on eBay.
I love it. Well, and that's the thing, eBay does sell some of this stuff, but they don't really, remember in the old days they pulled the artifacts off, but they'll sell t-shirts and all these other items, which is fine.
People complain. The problem with Joe Exotic is too many people are selling it, and it's factual crime. I don't know how it
that's true. And they're all profiting off of him, and he's sitting in prison. It's just, but again, that's the American way, right? It's like if Andy Gahan or anybody's going to say, hey, you can't sell this stuff, well, then these t-shirts are gone, and people better be very careful because these slopes can be very slippery. If we're all like, yeah, that stuff's gone, but then guess what? Something you love may be gone tomorrow, and that's what we were just talking about.
Let's say they do make it illegal and I start writing books. Well, he can't write books because he got all his information from the inmates.
Exactly.
Like, what are you talking about? The press isn't the enemy of the people, but under a regime like that where I can't sell my personal property, thinking very well could become a crime. And I get worried about stuff like that because it can happen. People think, it won't happen here. And so far, there's not a lot of traction, but I mean, stranger things have happened in America. And I'm not talking about stuff from the 1800s. And I'm talking about, stuff that my parents remember, like internment camps and, committing homosexuals and electroshock treatment for, gay conversion and shit that's happened in, that's happened in my lifetime even. That's happening today. And they just had, everybody saw it. The cops just killed a black guy in front of everybody with his hands in his pocket. Whistling.
30, 40 years ago, they'd say, wait, no, that's not, this is a Twilight Zone episode, right? It's like.
The thing is, nobody had cell phone cameras and there wasn't an internet. So people didn't know what went on in asylums. People didn't know what went on in prison.
These are our weapons. Yeah, our weapons now are these. Cell phones are our weapons. We need these. These are our weapons. All that other shit, if you're going to go out there and do this violent stuff, then, you're going to get the consequences. But if you could use this and prove it, people just use this. It's right here. It's a little phone, right? All right. Well, cool. This was a great show. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you, William Harder. This is amazing. Check out murderauction.com and killer bobbleheads? killerbobbleheads.com.
Bobbleheads.
Awesome. Yeah, everybody seemed to enjoy it. I had a great time. It's
Bobbleheads.
great seeing you. I haven't seen you for a long time, and we'll have you on the show again. Thank you so much.
I look